a blue palladio.
I'd like to tell you all a story about a wild, lonesome area of the West and a couple of pieces of its history. The area I'm referring to is simply called the West Desert by most locals, and it's located in the central western edge of Utah, and it spills over a little bit into eastern Nevada. We're talking pretty much from the Wawa Mountains and Snake Valley south, along Highway 6 and 50 on up through Callio and Fish Springs to Topaz Mountain and the western Dugway area. This is the kind of country where my family and others wintered their sheep. There's big doings out west this year. It's the 10th anniversary of the Sheepherders Gathering, held at the Border Inn in Baker, Nevada. The Sheepherders Gathering was started by Denise Coyle, and with a lot of help from her son Gary, their crew, and some local Snake Valley residents, they have made this a much-anticipated annual event, attended by working sheepmen past and present, as well as a respectable number of historians, folklorists, and a wide variety of desert rats, including former Nevada Governor Paul Laxalt, who himself is from a sheep ranching family.
Not just the sheep herders, but the ranchers and the people that grew up in this country. I've met some really incredibly strong, interesting people. And their stories are really incredible. And with the sheep herders, it's stories that nobody knows about. You know, they know in their own little circle, but people don't understand how important an industry it was, how tough a business it was, and what they had to go through.
The owners of the desert herds would draw out lots to determine the shearing dates at the Jericho Shearing Corral near Cherry Creek. We'd start trailing our herd toward Jericho in early April. This is a map of the West Desert sheep trails from the book on Jericho by Ralph Cook of Fountain Green, an old sheep man. Jericho was quite an operation. It was located along the Union Pacific Railroad tracks so the wool could be shipped to market. In 1922, 115,000 sheep were sheared, producing 3,300 sacks of wool. The shearers at Jericho came from all over the country, and often someone who had been the world champion shearer would be there. You could tell the good shearers by their count-out pen being full sooner. The shearers are paid by the head, you see. I tromped wool at Jericho a little bit, and boy, you had to make sure to go over yourself for sheep ticks at the end of the day. Nowadays, a lot of the shearers come from New Zealand and travel in a caravan around to the individual herds. Unfortunately, Jericho has gone the way of so many other iconic Western places that once played such a large and significant part of my young life. Those days at Jericho when the shears were clicking hard, shorn sheep were being counted out and branded, the cook shack alive with hungry men, and wool sacks being stacked under the shed to await shipment on the railroad, who of us could have foreseen Jericho going by the wayside? But today, that's the way of all too many things in the West.
Most of the herders were Mexican, and when they would come in, there'd be 20, 30 sheep herders here at any given time on a weekend. And then they just started going away, and pretty soon there were just 5 or 6, and there were fewer and fewer sheep herders. So I've been thinking for a year or two about something to do in the wintertime to liven the place up, and I thought, well, you know, I'll have an appreciation dinner for the sheep herders. And that first party, I thought maybe 50 or 60 people might come, and we had 90. By the end of the night, they were saying, "You're going to do this again next year, Denise?" And I go, "Well, probably." And that's what started it. It was supposed to be a one-time thanks for being here, but they had such a good time just sitting and talking and visiting. It became an annual thing.
Denise Coyle is putting together what may be the only historical collection about the sheepmen of the West Desert. With every year's gathering, there seems to be more memories going up in Denise's museum at the Border Inn. One of the most interesting subjects is the winter of 1949. When I was growing up, I would hear my grandpa and other old-timers talk about the winter of '49. There were fascinating stories about a huge storm and herds being stranded and spending the winter in corrals made out of snow. The following comes from the Salt Lake Tribune, dated February 6, 1949. I found this in my grandmother's scrapbook.
In the little desert town of Delta, Utah, men were willing to talk again after the first fury of the worst winter in western livestock history had spent itself on the vast rangelands. The story they tell may well become a part of the folklore and the history of the Intermountain country. In time, the winter of 1949 may become one of the great sagas of the West. But for now, we are too close to appraise it completely. Thousands of sheep and cattle still floundering in the snow may yet die of disease and malnutrition, despite all that has been done to save them. Inside the cramped quarters of a sheep wagon, while the wind whistled against the canvas covering, I talked to Ben Martinez, herder for Fred Ludlow of Spanish Fork, who stated, "I've lived in the desert most of my life, but I've never seen a winter as hard as this before."
And it was quite a winter. One newspaper called it the Great White Ruin. 17 inches of snow fell in Las Vegas. Air Force cargo planes were used to deliver hay to herds stranded by the storm. The government named this effort Operation Haylift, and there was even a feature film made about it, starring Bill Williams and Ann Rutherford. There was also a convoy of 10 trucks loaded with hay that headed into the desert, accompanied by 2 huge Caterpillar diesels that plowed the way for them. I had heard about this convoy for years, but Denise's museum has pictures of it. Denise's collection of stories and photographs provide an appealing history and a noteworthy part of the American West. In fact, if a person has the time and the wherewithal, dropping in on the Sheepherders Gathering in January is a good way to get warmed up for Elko.
And I don't know what to do. Bother ram, bother ram. Went to check the sheep because I just...
So the fun thing for me has been gathering all the history, because I didn't start out to be a bartender in the desert. I had my degrees in history.
And I don't know what to do. Bother ram, bother ram. I'm so lonesome and so blue, and I don't know what to do.